So, today we're going to talk about insight. And this is so important to begin to access and live from. The questions that come up for me that I ask Bill is, what is insight? What is it? Where does it? How do we access it? How do we create the conditions to really access it? And what benefits can it bring our lives?
Yeah, well, I think my first response to what is it is just as the word kind of implies, insight. It's a sight from within. I begin to see things differently than I've seen them before.
Very true.
And I've told my story about my thing with chocolate, how I used to go by the store in the West Edmonton Mall, Death by Chocolate, with their big glass case right out front. And every time I would go by, salivation, it's kind of like Pavlov's dog, I see this, I'm ready to eat.
Yeah.
And so then I'd make a decision, am I going to have something or not? And then one day I walked by, kind of anticipating the usual response. And that chocolate, those desserts might as well, I don't know why this came to my mind, but they might as well have been made out of cardboard. Just didn't have the same response. I saw them, all the desserts, completely differently. It was so fascinating. So that's what we mean by insight. It's not that we change how we look at things. How we look at things changes, and there's a world of difference in that.
Yeah, it happens on the inside instead of thinking about, oh, I've got to use my willpower and some strategy of affirmation that maybe will create change. Change happens at a deeper place within, from inside.
Yeah. And it's not that if we know something isn't good to do, we shouldn't use our willpower and self-determination to do what we know is right. But when we're doing it from up here, oh, I know it's wrong, and it's this kind of battle of right and wrong, then there's always a battle going on. But when we have the insight that, oh, this is the way to do it, it's like obvious. There's no longer this analysis of right and wrong, it's just obvious. And that is the basis of lasting change. Because when I'm battling right and wrong, chocolate cake tastes good. At some point, I give in. But when I see the chocolate cake in a way that my body has no desire for, why would I eat it? It's a whole different experience.
Yeah, I love looking at insight as what you said, sight within. It's a deeper kind of seeing, and when it happens, change occurs. It's so beautiful. You wanted to share more, and then I'll.
Okay, I'll just give one more analogy. As I was thinking about, we would talk about this today. One of my favorite illusions, you might say, is this picture. And if you look at this picture, what do you see? Typically, I see a young woman with a little head on, a little feather up on top. And the first time that I was shown this, the person told me, no, it's a picture of an old woman. And I'm going, how could that be considered an old woman? Right? This is not an old woman. This is a sweet jawline of eyelashes and a little necklace around her neck. And so all I could see was a young woman. I said, no, there's an old woman. Now look hard, take your time and really see if you can't see an old woman. And after a while, I'm kind of like, I don't see it, and kind of relaxed. And all of a sudden, these same lines, nothing had changed, same lines, but all of a sudden, instead of this being a chin, it became a nose. And this, instead of being an ear, became an eye. So a nose and an eye and a mouth, and the chin's down here. All of a sudden, I could see an old woman. So isn't it fascinating how the same circumstances the same black and white lines can be seen one way or the other. And life is like that. And what we feel insight is when we begin to see the whole picture and not get caught in our filters of, oh, it's only a young woman. Oh, chocolate is irresistible. I'll never be able to resist it. It's not true. Our inner wisdom knows what's best for us. And so insight is bringing our understanding and our experience in relationship with life more in line with the truth of what really nourishes us.
Yeah, so how do we create the conditions to have this insight and live from there? Because that's where all the joy and awareness of who we really are comes from. It's so simple, it's so easy. The first step is to begin to recognize that I'm living from what this voice up here is speaking, and to allow myself to pay that less attention. Let it continue speaking, but don't necessarily believe what it's telling me. And the second step is just to get quiet. Let that chatter settle. Get quiet. Sit for a moment, just a moment, and allow this to quiet down. And then if you ask a question, see what response comes from deeper within. So you want to get quiet for a moment, let this chatter settle down, and then, especially if you have a question, see what comes from deeper within. That's where insight originates, sight within. And when we do that, it just gets so amazing because we see this insight from deeper within we can really trust. And it can guide our lives perfectly. It is anyway. That's the funny part of it. But if we begin to be aware that it is, then the joy and the ease of life becomes so apparent, so obvious. Now, how does all this relate?
Now, let me just say one thing. I
Yeah.
really like what you're saying about this chattery mind, because it's like for so much of my life, I have this narrator going on all the time, kind of analyzing what's happening in my life and what I should do, what I shouldn't do, and all of that. And I began, one of my first really deep insights was that this chatter, this narration that's going in my mind isn't who I am.
Yeah.
So we all have the narrator. It's an important part of navigating life. But when we recognize that that is a narrator, that's our brain, our personal mind, and it's not who we are, and that who we are is connected to an intelligence that's much greater than the access we have in our personal mind. And it goes from identifying with my personal mind, I have to make a decision about what to eat. That's relying on just one aspect of the vision. That's just seeing the young woman. Okay, there's just a young woman there, so I have to deal with that. And so if I don't understand that I'm connected to this wisdom, then I just stay up there seeing the young woman. But when I begin to understand, this was my insight, oh, there's another way of seeing the same circumstance, the same set of black and white lines. There's a whole other way of seeing it. Then I drop out of that identification with my personal thinking. And like Connie says, we don't think from there. We just open and the intelligence reveals itself. That's what's so fascinating. I mean, we have phrases for it in our language. It just came to me out of the blue. Like, what's the blue? The blue is the intelligence.
Yeah, and some of us call it intuition because we all experience it many times. For me, what was so foundational is when I had the experience of more of who I really was, I saw that all this chatter and narrative was not where truth was, that wasn't the foundation place, the fount of truth, that came from deeper within me. Yeah, that was really good. And it's true for all of us. If we just quiet the chatter, the narration, don't give it all our attention, and especially if we ask a question, we can go deeper within.
Yeah, and in asking that question, it's not looking for information that we've learned in the past. In that asking the question, it's really opening to see what reveals itself instead of, oh, I can figure this out, I can put this together, and I've heard this and I've heard that, so that must be the answer.
That's a really important distinction. I'm glad you mentioned it. So, food.
Hey, what are we going to do?
Now, the way this relates to food that's so important and so practical as we access this deeper wisdom, we find ourselves moving away from old habits of using food for comfort. It's amazing what reveals itself.
Yeah, it's really fun because so often what drives our poor food choices is looking for relief from stress and tension in our lives. So our coaching is often not just directly related to what food choices you're making. It's helping you see how you're relating to life in a way that's creating stress that isn't necessary. The stress is being created because you're seeing the young woman when in fact the old woman is there too in the same circumstance. And when we have the insight about what's a deeper truth or reality in the situation, we don't get triggered in the way we used to get triggered. And when we don't have those triggers, we aren't making those, we're not thinking, where are the potato chips? Where are the chocolate chips? Where are the...
Yeah, well said. So take a moment, get quiet, ask a question from there and see what happens.
And we're happy to have a free consultation with you if you want to kind of test the waters.
Yeah, if you want to explore this more. Yeah, just connect with us, comments below, and we'll get right back to you. Now, the recipe today comes from Chef AJ. She called it not, what does she call it? Barefoot, because it knocks your socks off. It's a really good oil-free, nut-free dressing. And we altered it.
Yeah, it's a real knock your socks off recipe. And sure. So we find it a little more tangy, more everything than what we're looking for. So what we're giving you is a modified, well, we'll give you both Chef AJ's recipe and our modified recipe, which is just a little gentler. Leaves the knee socks on. I mean the ankle socks. Just eat it. And all the same flavor. It is a fabulous dressing.
Yeah, so you can use it on big salads, which we promote for health, or you can use it on steamed veggies. It's delicious. Give it a try.
Thanks, everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.